like to introduce our speakers and their presentation, Birding in Australia and Papua New Guinea. And Diane, Morton, and Suan Yong are going to do the presentation. They are both past presidents of the Cayuga Bird Club, and of the 5 members who went with this, I think we have 2 other past presidents, a past treasurer, the current treasurer, and needless to say, people are really active in this club and active in birding, and they're going to tell us about some really interesting birds.
Okay, well, so tonight, Suan and I will be telling you about this trip that we took to Australia and Papua New Guinea. As Tracy mentioned, there are 5 of us, all Cayuga Bird Club members who were part of the trip. It was a tour led by Field Guides Birding Company. And it was 2.5 weeks. We spent the first part in Cairns, in northeastern tropical Australia, then went to Papua New Guinea for a week, and then on to Brisbane for a few days, and south to Sydney. So it was a sampling of some areas of Australia, and then also a small part of Papua New Guinea. Our leaders for this tour, these field guide leaders, were Jay Vandergast, who's standing on the right, and Alex Sundvall on the left. They were really great guides. They were great at finding the birds. They were very organized and fun to bird with. Our group also included 3 other participants who were not Cayuga Bird Club members, and they were really pleasant people we enjoyed getting to know and to travel with. Our driver for the Northern Australian part was Clayton. He took this photo. He was also an excellent naturalist, particularly for questions about Australian plants or reptiles. On our tour, we found just over 400 bird species, nearly all of them live birds, because the birds here are so different from anywhere else. I'll start with some of the birds we saw most often. I'd also like to say that some of us came a little bit early to Cairns, including Susan and Deirdre. Cairns is known as the gateway to the Great Barrier Reef. We're not going to talk about that, but during the Q&A, if somebody's interested, Susan will be available to answer questions about that. Anyway, so this is the Torresian imperial pigeon. They're very common in northeastern Australia. We even had one nesting in a tree just outside our hotel room window. This is a willy wagtail. It's a small bird with a big, bold personality, very unafraid of people. We saw willy wagtails every day of the trip, except in the high mountains of Papua New Guinea. Rainbow lorikeets. They're noisy, breathtakingly colorful birds. We generally saw these in flight. They're surprisingly difficult to see when they land in the trees. But Suan got a nice shot of this one out in the open. Sulfur-crested cockatoos are common both in eastern Australia and in New Guinea. We also saw a couple of other cockatoo species. Australian ibises are in the wetlands, but also have moved into urban areas where they now have the nickname bin chickens, as they like to go for trash. We saw a number of crow-sized black and white birds, the most common being the Australian magpie. Butcherbirds and currawongs are closely related. The pied butcherbird is similar in size and has a similar bill, but has much more white on the body. The pied currawong is mostly blackbird with white in the tail and wings. And butcherbirds are so named, they have hunting behaviors similar to shrikes. Honey-eaters are a large family of birds in Australia and New Guinea with 55 different genera. On this tour, we saw 26 different species of birds with honeyeater in their name. We saw Lewin's honeyeater most often with its pale yellow cheek patch, but there are several other honeyeaters that have yellow cheek patches. For example, the cryptic honeyeater. but it has a different voice. So learning to distinguish those, our guides were very helpful. The fuscus honeyeater was one of the duller honeyeaters, but some of them, like the blue-faced honeyeater, are quite distinctive. The first morning of our tour, we walked along the Cairns Esplanade, which is a boardwalk that runs for 1.5 miles along the shore of the Coral Sea, right in front of the hotels and restaurants. There are native trees all along the way, and it turns out to be a great spot for bird watching. This double-eyed fig parrot flew into a tree as we were walking and poked its head into the nest cavity, which is right above where that bird is. It was such a very colorful, small little parrot. Not far from this, we saw our first fruit dove of the trip, the rose-crowned fruit dove. Its raspberry rose crown was a really amazing color. And here's a map of the birding spots that we visited in northern Australia, not far from Cairns. These hotspots included parks, wetlands, and rainforest. At one wetland, we watched this cone-crested jacana. Look at the feet. It was very skilled at running across the lily pads. The Sahul sunbird is the primary species of sunbird in northern Australia and the only sunbird species that we saw. We were able to watch this sunbird working on its hanging nest, bringing bits of leaves and attaching them with spider webs. You wouldn't even notice this nest at all were it not for the bird going back and forth. It's just kind of a messy thing hanging in the air there from a branch. The Australian brush turkey is an interesting species of megapode, or bigfoot. We often saw them scratching in leaf litter, sometimes making piles. Rather than incubating their eggs with their own body heat, brush turkeys create mounds of decaying vegetation up to 4 feet high, and the eggs are incubated inside the mound. The heat of the decomposing leaf litter keeps the eggs warm, and the male tends the mound, adding or removing vegetation to regulate that temperature. When the eggs hatch, the chicks are fully feathered, active, and able to forage for themselves independently. The term for this is super precocial. Orange-footed megapodes employ the same nesting strategy, using their big feet to create mounds of vegetation. The lovely fairy-wren. This was our first fairy-wren of the trip. We saw this pair low in the shrubs near a wetland. The male and female were both very active at the time. They had a young fledgling to feed. I have to say that October turned out to be a great time of year to travel to Australia. So many of the birds we saw were either nesting, courting, or had young. So that added a really nice bit, so it was fascinating to watch these behaviors. At another wetland, we found a pair of red-backed fairy-wrens among the reeds, also with a nest. We also stopped on this trip for mammals, and as we headed west from Cairns, we saw our first kangaroos on the grounds of a golf course. Note the joey in the pouch of the kangaroo on the left. We headed to Granite Gorge Nature Park to see Mammals rock wallabies, which are a very rare species of wallaby, only found in the Rocky Highlands west of Cairns. These small marsupials hop around very fast, but at the park, they provide visitors with food to hand feed them, and they're very friendly. This is our guide Alex feeding one of them. We all did this. This area is also where we saw our first laughing kookaburra, an iconic Australian bird. They're a type of terrestrial kingfisher, which you might be able to tell by their shape and the large bill. They wait on a branch until they see an animal or insect, then fly down and pounce on it. This is the most common species of kookaburra that we saw. We were also up there to look for great bowerbird. Some bower sites are known to be used by the same male for more than 10 years, so our guides knew where to find them. This great bowerbird bower is a twin-walled avenue type bower decorated with snail shells. Here's a male great bowerbird adding small bits to its bower. The males have a small pinkish purple crest at the nape of the neck that's difficult to see, but Suan got a photo. We traveled to the rainforest of the Atherton Tablelands and stayed at Chambers Rainforest Lodges, which is very close to several large national parks. The Chambers Rainforest Lodges was my favorite of the accommodations we stayed at on this trip. Here's Ken right outside our cabin. There are birds everywhere. It's beautiful, it's secluded. It's just a really special place. We birded the lodge grounds early in the morning before breakfast. There were Victoria's riflebirds, whipbirds, and songbirds were in the dense foliage, and difficult to photograph. These brown cuckoo doves were out where we could see them. And it turns out they had a nest in a huge bromeliad right next to the path. And Suan was able to zoom in on that nest.
Oh my God.
The fledglings. The Wampu fruit dove is an especially large and impressive fruit dove. It's about 18 inches in length and has a deep purple breast. The common name Wampu is for the sound of its call. The Latin species name is Megaloprepia magnifica, which means something like noble magnificence or even magnificence magnificent. We also saw this bird in Papua New Guinea. These two monarchs are small insect-eating birds found in the rainforest, the black-faced monarch and the Australian spectacled monarch. We went up to Mount Hippopotami National Park and were birding along the road. Our guides heard a distinctive bird sound and we wanted to find this particular bird. Can you guess what this is high up in a tree branch? It's a Victorian Riflebird. As a male was putting on a courtship display right above us. There are 11 people on this road all looking up and watching the Victoria's Riflebird. It's amazing.
Was there a female bird watching?
Well, we'll find out. Here's a shortened version of Suan's video recording of the male Riflebird's display, which went on for several minutes. Oh, wow. The female did come in.
No, you go right ahead.
Okay, there it goes.
Oh, look at that.
He continued though, displaying, hoping to attract her back.
Now he's swaying.
And she did return. And she responded with her own moves, which is really cool to see. And success. So I have to say that the experience of watching this elaborate courtship display of the Victoria's Riflebird and the interaction between these two birds was, for me, a real high point for this trip. It was just amazing. And especially with all of us down there talking and everything, they just went about their business. Jay then led us to a golden bowerbird bower, where they use lichen to decorate their bower. They're found in high elevation rainforests, only in a very small part of Queensland. There were no fully mature adult males that we could find, but a young male golden bowerbird was practicing its moves. It can take up to 6 years for them to develop their full adult plumage, which is a bright golden yellow on the breast and nape. Oh, just getting the hang of it. We all really wanted to see a platypus on this trip, and had spent quite a bit of time one evening at a riverside stakeout, waiting and watching, but only got a very brief glimpse of one. But here, while we were birding, and on a small footbridge over a creek at Mount Hippopotami National Park, one suddenly appeared in the creek below us.
Oh my goodness.
We are so glad we got to see this animal. It's truly a weird mammal and really amazing. The curtain fig tree is quite a spectacular tree. It's a strangler fig over 500 years old with a trunk circumference of 128 feet, and it's more than 160 feet tall. You can see the pedestrian boardwalk that goes around on the right side of that left picture for scale. So that's a pedestrian boardwalk big enough for many people to walk on. So it's this huge tree.
Was that a park?
Yes, now there's a park for this tree. It's the Curtain Fig Tree Park. And it's great because it attracts a lot of people up there to learn more about the rainforest. So they come to see this tree, but they're introduced to rainforest habitat. While we were there, we saw this scarlet myzomela, which is a colorful species of honeyeater, the smallest of the honeyeaters. We also saw these birds several other times on the trip.
Wow.
This area also had a remarkable colony of spectacled flying foxes. We had seen flying foxes flying about the city of Cairns at night, but it was much easier to see these animals here. They are big. This one in flight, well, they have a wingspan of 4 to 5 feet. So it's not like bats, they're flying foxes. They're really big. And they have very expressive faces. We saw some other nocturnally active mammals back at Chambers Rainforest Lodges, where they put out honey in the evening. They wipe it on the side of a tree to attract honey-loving possums and other animals. One of these is the aptly named sugar glider, a small nocturnal flying possum. And the striped possum also came in. We were able to see several other possum species at night roosting in the trees along the roads. As we headed back to Cairns, we made a detour to Eddy Bay Beach for a special bird. There aren't very many birds on this beach, but shorebirds were not our goal here. We needed to look into the vegetation to find a Southern Cassowary, adult male with its chick. Cassowaries are huge birds. The adults are about 5.5 feet tall. And the male cassowary is the sole caregiver for the young for up to 16 months. Here is the chick, better view. Our last stop before Cairns was to the Moresby rodeo grounds for a unique type of bird that is found in open dry habitat. This is the apostle bird, one of only 2 species in the Australian mud nester bird family. The apostle bird has its name because they associate in cooperative groups of about 12 with one dominant male. And here's one of their mud nests. The cooperative group works together on nest building, incubating, and feeding young. So they take turns with all of those chores. Back in Cairns, we were able to spend some time along the Esplanade while the tide was out studying shorebirds, including this far eastern curlew. And then, who should we see but Laura Stensler in Tonchat, also birding on the Esplanade. We knew that these 2 Cayuga Bird Club members were in Australia, but we did not expect to run into them on our trip. So here's a photo of the 7 Cayuga Bird Club members here together on the Esplanade. The next morning, we headed to Papua New Guinea, which is not far from Northern Australia, closer actually than Brisbane is to Cairns. The island of New Guinea is the 2nd largest island in the world after Greenland, something I hadn't known until recently. It's 3 times larger, for example, than all of New Zealand. The island of New Guinea has many endemic species of birds and other wildlife, including some of the birds of paradise. We had a relatively quick flight on Air New Guinea, you see that spelled out there, to Port Moresby, the capital of Papua New Guinea. And notice the bird on the side of the plane. We did not do any birding in Port Moresby itself. The first afternoon, we took a van to the town of Lea on the coast. And on subsequent days, we drove east from Port Moresby to Warirata National Park, about an hour away. Our van for that first trip to Lea included a driver and a local bird guide with us. But 2 other local men got into the van too. Susan asked, who were they? And one turned around and smiled and said, security. We were not in Australia anymore. The beach did not have as many shorebirds as we'd hoped for, but it was a beautiful Friday evening, and people in the homes lining the beach were enjoying dinner and music. They gave very friendly responses to our waves and hellos. It was really quite pleasant. We did see lesser frigate birds here. They're birds of the Southwest Pacific and Indian Oceans. And this was the highlight for that stop, a silver-eared honey-eater. This bird has an extremely restricted range, just in a few spots in Papua New Guinea. The next day, we headed up to the higher, more rugged forest habitat of Warirata National Park. We needed to wait for someone to come open the gate, and as we were birding, we heard loud wing beats overhead. These are Blythe's hornbills. They're found only in New Guinea and the Solomon Islands, and they were the only species of hornbill that we had for our trip. We did see more Blythe's hornbills a couple days later. We also saw yellow-faced mynas, which are endemic to New Guinea. We had seen common mynas while we were in Australia. And our local guide knew where to find barred owlet nightjar. He scraped the side of a tree with a stick to have the bird pop up to see what's going on. It's a very small, big-eyed bird. This is another endemic of New Guinea, a frilled monarch type of flycatcher. And here are 2 new kookaburras for us. The blue-winged kookaburra on the left is found in both Papua New Guinea and Australia, actually the whole island of New Guinea. But this was our first sighting of one. Rufous-bellied kookaburra, however, is restricted to New Guinea.
This is the one that's related to the kingfisher, you said?
Yeah, so all of the kookaburras are related to kingfishers, but they're terrestrial.
And they eat insects.
They eat insects or sometimes other, I think, lizards or things like that, small animals.
Diane, does the rufous-bellied have the same crazy call as the other kookaburras?
No, this is what it sounds like. That was a pun. Yeah, so a squeaky call. We also saw some beautiful pigeons. These are Zoe's imperial pigeon and the purple-tailed imperial pigeon. They're quite big. The fruit doves, we saw new endemic fruit doves here. They come in a variety of colors, but they can be very difficult to see, especially when they're green, like the dwarf fruit dove is. And here too, this pink spotted fruit dove. You can see how well it blends into a fruit tree. So they have to move before you notice them. Along a trail where we were walking, we saw an olive flight robin. using spider webs to work its nest. Wraps it all around. Okay, can you spot the two birds on this tree? They are on a nest. These are Papuan frogmouths, an adult and young bird on the nest. Unmoving, very easy to miss. Luckily, our guide knew about where to look for these. They're incredibly well camouflaged. The bird on the left was another adult on a different branch. And you can see its beautiful back and wing plumage that looks just like tree bark. Yeah, this was an incredible find. We were all super excited to see these. Our local guide also knew that there was a family of barking owls in the area and found them for us. Here are the 3 young sitting in a tree, and the 2 adults were in the neighboring tree.
Watching you.
Okay, Suan will now take over and present the rest of the trip.
Right, thank you, Diane. So now we fly from Port Moresby for 1 hour up to Mount Hagen, which is the 3rd largest city in Papua New Guinea. And the infrastructure is very limited in Papua New Guinea. There's actually no road connection between Port Moresby and Mount Hagen, so you have to fly or take a boat around to Lane or something. So here we are up in the Highlands, a very different climate, much cooler and a lot cloudier, a lot of clouds covering the mountains. And here's just a little market for people selling various things. The ones in the middle are selling beetle nuts, which are very popular among the local population. You also notice people are wearing sweaters because it's cooler, but most people are still bare feet. So we had about an hour's drive from Mount Hagen Airport up to Kumu Lodge, where we would spend the night. And along the Highlands Highway, this is a sampling of what the highway looked like. I actually took this video by accident. I'm going to take a photo, but I clicked the wrong button, but I thought it actually ended up being better. And so we eventually reached the Kumu Lodge, which has a nice feeder setup. And if you're familiar with tropical feeders, the most popular thing to use is papayas, which are those orange things. So if you see the papaya on the rightmost papaya, there's this funny black thing with a white thing hanging down on it. That is a ribbon-tailed Astropia. So this, although we had kind of lousy looks at birds of paradise earlier, I'm going to call this our first bird of paradise and start a counter. So this is Bob number 1. Yeah, I know. So these have striking iridescence, kind of like hummingbirds, nothing but they're huge. You can see there's a bit of a purplish crimson collar underneath below the green also. And so they're so named for their long ribbon tail. And the female is more subdued, but still very striking birds. And so this video is going to show one of them foraging. You can pay attention to the lower right corner, another bird's going to pop up. Oops, what is that? We'll come back to that bird. Okay, this bird's going to fly. Listen to it fly. I'm not sure you can hear that. This one's going to fly also. You hear they make a rattling sound. They're really noisy. They are not like owls trying to hide their flight. They're explicitly announcing themselves. So it's very easy to know when one is around. Just hear the rattling sounds. Very strange. So that other bird was a brown sicklebill, in this case a male, and I'll call this Bob number 2. So the male is darker with some blue in the back, and this is actually not a fully mature male because it actually tail gets longer and it grows some bustle feathers on the side. But we saw more females than males, and they're very different, very brown, actually more interesting patterning, I think. And if you look at the mouth, it seems like, I don't know if most or all birds of paradise seem to have colorful insides of their mouths. That seems to be part of the thing with them. So here we have a video showing them trying to eat fruit with their awkward long bill. They have to do this. They were doing this the whole time. You just watch them all day. have the female doing the same thing. That bird is a smoky honey eater flying by.
It's work.
Got it. There was also this mother feeding its young, so of course it's hard to tell just from the size alone that one is a young, but when you see them feeding, so I video and you can listen to the young even make this high pitch begging sound. So other birds we saw around the feeders include this Brand's tiger parrot, this small little chunky little fellow, and this Stelis lorikeet with this very long tail. And this is what it looks more like in the side profile. I also got a photo of it before taking off, unloading itself a little. So this is a Belfurst melodectes. They're among the most common birds we saw in the Highlands. They're almost everywhere. And it's a pretty long name, so we just call them Pademelons. And the smoky honey eater is one of the most common birds at the feeders. Their face actually can change color from yellow to red. And so this one has a bit of both. So from our base in Kumu Lodge, we spent the next 2 days driving to various sites up to an hour away to look mainly for birds of paradise. And so there are some of these beautiful places, beautiful valley, and we'll be going to various properties and other parks to go to. These are all people's properties, and local guides will know where to go with the landowners and also know where these birds of paradise like to hang out. So here there's this striking valley with nice waterfall. But the weather for much of the time there was very wet and overcast, if not raining. And so some of the trails were really muddy and also quite a lot of rain. But Deirdre was ready for the rain.
And the birding was just as good in the rain?
Well, we'll see. So this is Wilson, our local guide, who was very good, and Jay, who's one of our main field guides guide. And so the birding tended to be like this. You would see this distant in foggy shade. You may see a color. Actually, you're usually looking for movement, and then you see the color. What is that? In this case, it is a lesser bird of paradise. So I've called this spot number 3. But the other birds of paradise, the views weren't as great. This is a magnificent bird of paradise, but the view isn't that magnificent. The actual bird has these coiled tails and very flashy colors in the back, but this is about as good a view as we got. And so this is another challenging bird. Can you see it? It's in the middle. It's a blue color. I see. Okay, that's a blue bird of paradise. And we actually waited like 2 to 3 hours at this place before it finally appeared in the distance. And then we have the greater Lofarina. This has these breast shields that come out. They're the ones that turn to the oval, this funny thing. But this is the only view we got of one. So this looks like just another market, right? Well, this market just popped up for us, basically. When we first arrived at this spot, there was nothing there. We just started hiking up and we came back down. They had set up a little market and they were basically just selling pillow bags, which I guess I'll have Diane, we have some on the table. And yeah, we can show them later.
Yeah.
And so this is a kind of the leader of the community there talking to Jay. And again, you can see the kids are going around barefoot, even though the weather was around 60s when we were up there. An interesting thing you see a lot up there is smoke coming out of the roofs. Apparently that's what they do. They just have fires inside the house for warmth and for cooking, and they just let the smoke go through the thatch roof, no chimneys. So basically the birding in the Highlands of Papua was very challenging. It was very wet. The views were very distant, and when we saw things, they were kind of hiding behind leaves. But we did end up in this one spot that ended up being our favorite. We came back to this site a few times, and you can see there's a garden in the middle of that area. A lot of people grow gardens, apparently known for gardens. And this became a theater where we saw all kinds of species, but a lot of them were not great views, but we did get some good views over here, including Stephanie's Astrapia. So this is related to the ribbon-tailed Astrapia, which is the very first shiny one we saw at the lodge, but this one has a bigger club tail. And there's also the Laureus satinbird, which is a much more subdued bird of paradise. The female looks very different. I say bird of paradise, it turns out DNA studies show that it's actually not a bird of paradise. It's not as related, so now moved to its own family. It's closer to cuckoo shrikes, they think. They're still not sure. So I guess we have to subtract one from our count. But the star of the show here is a king of Saxony bird of paradise, which our guide Alex says is the bird with the most English words in their common name, king of Saxony bird of paradise. And they have these crazy antennas, and they also have this song that sounds very insect-like. See if you can hear it. Once again.
Comes off his head and his tail.
Yeah, so as I said, we saw a lot of other birds, but most were very difficult to see, difficult to photograph, very distant. So I'll only show a couple that I got maybe decent views of. They're kind of colorful, including this blue-capped Ifrita, which crawled around the tree, kind of like a nuthatch. And there are these blue-faced parrot finches, which are kind of pretty and hard to see because they're green and they're tiny, but they do kind of look like parrots. And so that was the end of our stay at Mount Hagen. It's time to fly back to Port Moresby. So on this final day, the clouds did clear enough for us to actually see Mount Hagen. It's kind of like Denali, it's always shrouded in clouds and rarely will reveal itself. It kind of revealed itself that last day. So down we are back in Port Moresby, and the afternoon we went to the Pacific Adventist University campus, which has these nice ponds, so it's great for a good place to bird. Actually got some really good close views of a lot of water birds over here. So the lingua franca of Papua New Guinea is called Tokpisin. It's an English-based pidgin, so it's a lot of words that are derived from English but spelled phonetically, like you saw Air New Guinea was spelled that way. So here, no can swim. So poor Ken had to wait there while the rest of it went swimming. Not really. So they had streets named after whistling ducks, and indeed we did see some wandering whistling ducks. So here's a Pacific black duck. This is actually quite common even in Australia, but I got my best photos here. And here's the fawn-breasted bowerbird. The bowerbirds tend to be somewhat boring-looking birds, but of course they have really neat bowers. In this case, on these sticks, I don't know how they do the sticks, but there's some little plants over there. So here we are going through the bush into the dark part in search of common paradise kingfisher with this really long tail. I think most of the birds, where they stick the word paradise in the name, have a long tail. It's not 100%, but it seems to be the case. We did have some coconut lorikeets fly by. These are basically the offshore cousins of the rainbow lorikeets in Australia. So they look very similar. And so the next day, our final day in final full day in Papua New Guinea, we went back to Wairarapa National Park. The first trip, which Dad described, the weather was not as good and the birds of paradise were not cooperative. We looked for them, we didn't really see them. We may have seen a female, lousy looks, but on this day, they cooperated. We got right under them, bottom up view. You can see the fancy. This is a Rajiana bird of paradise. And the local name is a kumul. If you remember our lodge in Mount Hagen, it's called Kumul Lodge. It is a national bird of Papua New Guinea. And if you recall the plane we flew earlier, it's got the face of this bird on it. So this is a crinkle-collared manucode, which is, these are kind of the less interesting birds of paradise, but I thought I'd throw them in because we're doing the bob counter. I put crinkle-collared in parentheses because I think this is crinkled collar. Our checklist, there are so many species, I basically relied on Alex to maintain the checklist for us, which he shared with us. So we have 3 species of manicodes observed at Varirata. And based on that and thinking, this is a crinkled collar, but they look very similar, so I won't vouch for that. And this is actually from our first trip to Varirata. We had this growling riflebird, which you can see some of their purplish feathers on the breast. So it wasn't a great view, but I guess I managed to get some photos of it. So we also have this brown-headed paradise kingfisher, and I'm gonna play it singing and watch its tail as it sings. Yeah, that's a great video that Ken took with his scope. So here's a black-capped lory. One of pretty much all the birds I've been showing are Papua New Guinea endemics. I had like 1 million photos. I had to cut to keep this talk short. And we have this bird which has a single word name, golden face. And apparently it rarely sits still, but the guide heard it calling, and so we did the playback to call it in, and eventually just landed right above us. So, in preparation for this talk, I finally got around to processing these videos, and I uploaded this to eBird Macaulay, and this is the second video of this species in eBird, and the first one singing. So here we have, we are looking down this trail. I guess we had heard a pitta. So Alex put his speaker down at the end of the trail right about there, and so we waited, and eventually we called in this eastern hooded pitta. So yeah, I guess that's kind of how pitta watching works. So this is the main lookout at Varirata, but so this was from the first trip we had done earlier. But on this day, it finally cleared up and the view was fantastic. You can see down all the way to the Coral Sea, and in fact, Port Moresby is visible up in the corner. But the view didn't last. By the time we wrangled ourselves together to get a group photo, the fog had started rolling in. So that ends our journey in Papua New Guinea as we flew back down, halfway down the country to Brisbane, a 3-hour flight. And it was a bit of a culture shock to come back into civilization. We took a water taxi down to the metropolis, and we went to the Botanic Gardens downtown, where we were once again reintroduced to the good old bin chickens. They were nesting there, making more bin chickens. And there are these bush thickneys sitting there. How many birds do you see in this photo? Yeah, there are 2 adults and there are 2 chicks sitting right down there. And as we took the water taxi back to our hotel, these flying foxes would fly over. Pretty incredible. So the following day, we went to some wetlands to see things like royal spoonbill, black swans, another Australian specialty. There's also a dusky moorhen sticking out the back of the rhino swan. And it's crested pigeons, just kind of cute.
Were there more swans in the distance?
Not in this view, but yeah.
Because you see purple on the water.
Yeah, I'm not sure. There could have been. But our only miss on this trip was koalas. We went to this koala rehabilitation center. It was closed, but there was supposed to be possibly koalas at the forest, but they're hard to find. So we looked and we didn't find them. Our consolation prize was this tawny frogmouth on a nest. And so we were making our way from Brisbane down south and uphill into the Highlands to O'Reilly's rainforest retreat. On the way, we stopped by for lunch in a small town called Canungra, and again, we had huge colonies of flying foxes, in this case, gray-headed, different species from earlier. But they were everywhere. It's just a small snapshot of a few trees. They were like, the entire forest was this way. It is considered an agricultural pest because I guess they eat fruits. Excuse me. So we made our way to O'Reilly's rainforest retreat in Lamington National Park, and here we were greeted by a couple of king parrots. So this place is known for where you hand feed the birds, and here this is where a lot of people will feed the birds and have seeds left over, and so here are a lot of mainly crimson rosellas on the ground, and also some of the brush turkeys. All kinds of birds will come here visiting in different times. So this, I was greeted in my room's balcony by this fellow. I think this picture speaks for itself. Fancy hats, we can call this. Yeah, that's a king parrot with slightly orange color, green wings. The one with the purple is a crimson rosella. That's like a female bowerbird in the background. That's colorful. Yeah, here we're dominated by the crimson rosella, but notice in the background this black and yellow bird. Yeah, that is the Regent's bowerbird. It's kind of the mascot of this place. And the parrots are much more dominant, and so the bowerbirds kind of have to hang back and wait by their time and wait for an opening to come and strike and grab their food. It's like the Christmas tree decoration out there. Pretty incredible. Of course, you have the Regent's bowerbird, the male here. There was also another bowerbird here, the satin bowerbird. It is the male. I'm not sure if you can make out the purple color in the eye. The purple is much more striking than the female. And these birds would actually come to our balconies, but not to be fed by us. They would come to the moths. They got attracted by the lights overnight. So this is the view from O'Reilly's outside down from the top of the hill. Beautiful place. And our target was the Albert's lyrebird. So there are two species of lyrebirds in the world, and this is the rarer one. It's very limited to very few places, and this is one of the few places you can see it, and a lot of people come and don't see it. So it's a hit and miss would we see this bird. We were very lucky the very first morning, 5 steps down the trail, there was one. Not only was it one, it was a male, and it decided to display. It was a little drizzly that morning, so I did not bring my camera. Luckily, our guide Alex did, and he took this photo. But I did get to see the female later, which is not quite as striking, but still an interesting bird. So, lyrebirds are, so what family or group do you think lyrebirds are? You would think they may be, galliform or brush turkey or something. These are passerines. These are perching birds. And they're candidates for the largest perching bird species. Their competing species for largest is something familiar to us. Anybody have a guess? Raven. Raven is the other possible. These look a lot bigger than ravens to me.
And they're mimic birds, right?
Yes, they are very good mimics,
Like
and they
ravens.
mimic like lasers and things like that. So here we saw another riflebird, in this case a paradise riflebird, and based on the patterning, that patterning typically indicates a female, so this is a young male, and he was practicing his moves.
He's really in the head barbie.
Yeah, they do this dab thing. So those dance moves don't come on their own, you have to practice. Yeah, so as we walked down the rainforest trail, our guides heard this owlet nightjar and then found it in this cavity, so it was kind of neat sighting. We had the other owlet nightjar from in Papua New Guinea that they knew about, but it's a different species, it's an Australian one. So the fairy-wrens are one of another iconic Australian birds. So the superb fairy-wren we saw a lot more of them. They end up being somewhat common, but still very striking. The variegated is much more limited, and we only saw them on this trip at Lamington. So this is a green catbird, and I want to listen to it and see what it sounds like to you. Yeah, some describe it as sounding like a baby crying.
Yeah, it has like.
But you can, with the green, it's actually very hard to see them. You would hear them and you'd have a hard time finding them. Here's a beautiful rose robin photo that Diane took in the morning light. And here's the spotted partelote. It's a tiny, tiny bird with a really intricate pattern. And so with that, we move to the final leg of our trip from Brisbane down to Sydney, where we've spent 2 nights. We basically had 1 full day of birding. And we're basically spending it all in Royal National Park, south of the city. And the target here was the superb lyrebird, which is the bigger but the more common species. We did eventually see 1 male just run by real fast, so we did see 2 females or juveniles foraging. So here's the video. I like how their head stays in place as they dig. And that also gave you a bit of the soundscape of that area. I couldn't tell you what any of those were. I was hoping there would be some whipbirds, one of the neatest sounds of a bird down there, but I didn't get any good. They were hard to see, I didn't get any footage. So we also went out to the coast in Royal National Park. And yeah, there are a few birds that were specialized to this habitat, but the surprise thing we saw here were humpback whales breaching. Pretty much right there, and they breached repeatedly enough that I was able to get a couple of photos. And from there we went to a local park where they knew a powerful owl had reported. Here's a close-up. And that was pretty much the final bird of our long trip. So in the end, we had 406 total species, about 250 in Australia and 200 in Papua New Guinea. But 107 were New Guinea endemics. I put a tilde in front because I kind of counted the Solomon Islands, some were endemic to that. But we had 15 birds of paradise, 13 in Papua New Guinea, and the 2 Australian Riflebirds are also birds of paradise. So with that, thank you very much.